Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Star Trek Voyager, Season 1, Episode 6, Eye of the Needle. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we're great, we're awesome, we're a good time, and we're trying not to have camera difficulties. I apologize if the thing suddenly shifts or does something else weird. It's been a bit of a day here, all right, so just bear with me. Now, I know I did say a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. Of course, that is how we started out, but we have since moved on to Star Trek Voyager. And as you just heard David say, we're in the first season of that show, and we will be talking about the Eye of the Needle episode. But before we get to all that, we like to do a little weekly recap because a lot of times this is the only time that David and I get to actually speak to each other during the week. So, with that in mind, David, how has your week been?
Week's been fine. Pretty normal, just going to work. But this afternoon, after getting off, was able to spend some time with my nieces who are at my parents' place. So was just there having some fun with them. And we're gonna this week here in a couple days. We'll probably go to the zoo. However, the weather tonight going into tomorrow is going to be a large drop in temperature out here in Austin. So the original plan, they were going to go to the zoo tomorrow, but because of the weather, they decided to push it back till Tuesday, which also means I'm available to go, which is nice. But um, this week, I had initially planned on reading Project Hail Mary, which is the movie coming out this weekend. I was planning on taking my time and reading it over the course of this next week. I already finished it. It was really good. It's really well written. Um, just like The Martian, it's very science heavy, but filled with a character that's very relatable and enjoyable. So I already finished that book. I'm already moved on to the next thing I'm reading, which is about the founding father, um, Patrick Henry, the one who said, give me liberty or give me death. So I just started that. But yeah, Project Hail Mary. Looking forward to the movie. The book was really good. Um, the movie looks to be really good as well. Last week, I didn't mention that I had also finished book 3 of the Pendragon cycle, which was called Arthur. It ends on a huge cliffhanger, book 3. So I plan on getting back to that one after I finish this biography of Patrick Henry. But at the moment, it was a huge cliffhanger, and I'll just I won't say much because who knows if you're not reading it, it doesn't make much sense. But I was very surprised by the cliffhanger because there's still 3 books to go, and it was one of those like, how do they move on from this kind of cliffhanger? But I'll get to that one at some point, and then yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's much else really to report. So, what's new with you?
Well, as we uh, were looking at this upcoming week last week, I realized we had a Friday the 13th, we had Pi Day of March 14th, and then, of course, we have the Ides of March, which is today. And
Mm.
as you may or may not remember, on the Ides, Perry is shut down. Perry does not do anything on the Ides. It's
I,
gotten progressively worse as I've gotten older. I attribute all this to the fact that when I was in high school many, many, many years ago, I read Julius Caesar and, of course, the infamous line, "Beware of the Ides of March." And of course,
Mhm.
as you know, if you've read Julius Caesar, you know that's was the soothsayer's warning to Caesar, and that's also subsequently when he died, when he was murdered, I should say, and betrayed
Mhm.
by his so-called best friend and supporter.
Mhm.
So since that time, I've like always taken it as a day to just kind of do something different. But over time, it's become something else entirely. Like now, I will schedule off work, for example. No chores are done, no errands are run. Sometimes I don't even answer my phone because I just, I'm very much into this whole just not being a part of the world for that day.
Uh,
So the day was no different, but I did decide to spend some time getting caught up on a few things, starting some things, and also watching a couple movies that I know were nominated for Oscars, but I have no idea if they won or not. I know the Oscars were also tonight. I did not watch them because I don't care to watch them, as we discussed a little bit earlier. But for me, I started finally this book here. This is one that we had talked about reading now that we have finished the Dune
Mm.
book series. I'm not sorry, not Dune. Wow, no,
Expanse.
Expanse book series. Only and even though the authors of the Expanse series also have a new series that they're working on, which we've decided that we're going to start. I just want to give myself a little bit of a basically a mental palate cleanser, basically.
Mm,
Uh, Take a break from James S.A. Corey for a bit, and that's why I decided to get this one. Now I do have their new book in the first book in their new series. It's right here. It's on my to-do list. But again, just to give myself a little break from their style so that I can come back to it and appreciate it. I thought I would start this one first. Very interesting start to a book. I'm just barely into it. So I'm not even gonna try to like um give a synopsis or breakdown of anything like that. But it's different. I will say that, but not in a like welcome way.
okay.
Uh, I do like that the book has like it comes with its own world building map. It's kind of similar to what we got from the Lord of the Rings, for example. Or if you were a Game of Thrones enthusiast, there's a map of the world and things
Hmm.
like that. So I like things like that because it definitely helps to
Hmm.
give you a good frame of reference for things.
Right.
Uh, so you get that in here as well, and they make a couple of references that make having the map handy. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at it. All these books are available on Amazon, so if you want to read any of them and follow along with us, of course you can. Go ahead and check them out. And again, that's this book right here, Children of Blood and Bone. I'm not going to try to pronounce the author's name because I don't want to butcher said name. But Children of Blood and Bone. This is the first book of a three-book series. So just bear that in mind when you're going to Amazon to order them. You may be a person who wants to go ahead and order them all. Up to you. Just know that.
Children of Virtue and Vengeance, I think is number two, and then I forget. It's like A words. Children of something and something,
Mm.
Anarchy and something. I think, but I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
They're there. If you find the first one, the other ones are linked to it.
Right.
So
100%.
that's the easiest way to do that. Now, the movie that I watched today was again Oscar nominated movie Sinners, which I did just look up and I saw that it was an Oscar winner. So I do know at least it won. I thought that the movie was very interesting to say the least. It tapped into several different types of folklore that we don't really see in a lot of mainstream movies, which I'm a big fan of mythology and folklore in general. So getting to see things like that, I always appreciate. I thought the movie had a little bit of a slow start, but I think that's kind of common with period movies
Right.
because there's so much that you have to do to establish the world that you're getting ready to be a part of. And otherwise, if you rush too soon, certain things just won't make sense. I do feel like there were certain things about the movie that could have been a bit better. We could have gotten, maybe if we had got some additional story, some backstory on a couple of characters, I think it would have helped the story out more. But I also like in watching the movie, there were moments when I felt like these things should have been there, but it almost felt like you could tell where they had cut something out because of time or something. So
Hmm.
I'd be very interested to know if there is a director's cut of this movie, so that you can get those filled in spaces and maybe
Right.
see how that changes the movie a bit. But overall, I really liked again the deep dive into that um 1920s 30s folklore, um the supernatural aspect added onto it with the vampires and things like that,
Right.
the importance of music, of story, of history. I liked all of those things, and I also liked Michael B. Jordan's performance here. He's playing two characters, and not only is he playing two characters, but he's playing twins who have to interact with each other. And
Right.
whenever that kind of cinematic magic basically happens, I know that it's got to be tough.
Right.
on the actor, So yeah, definite props to him for being able to pull it off. In fact, there are a couple of scenes, and they're just little things like him having to pass a cigarette to the other twin, or hand him a knife, or even the hug that they do, and the way that they do it to make it so seamless and to really match those characters up. They did a really good job in that. So again, props to the CGI guys for doing it, but also to Michael for being able to play that off. That had to be really hard, especially on the scenes where they're like standing side by side. And again, it's passing a cigarette, pass a bottle, pass, something or another, uh, yeah, great job. Great job.
Right.
So I can definitely see why it got the Oscar nod. And now that I found out that they won, again, certain things make sense. My only critique, like truly negative critique, is that much like when we would review Trek episodes, how many times we say this would make a great two-parter, right?
Uh,
I feel like this movie would have been a great trilogy because of the world building and because of how much history you really need with a lot of the characters and the folklore that they're utilizing for the story. We just don't have enough time to let it build so that the climactic end really hits you, you
right.
know? And I feel like if this was a three-part movie dealing with that, it would have really just, over the top. But I understand
Right.
there were constraints, and often movies that you're especially wanting um, Oscar consideration for, they don't do parts. It's an all-in-one complete thing. I don't think I've ever heard of um, a trilogy of any kind winning an Oscar or anything like that. I could be wrong, and if I am, I don't know the history of every movie ever, but
Right.
I've never even heard of a movie that had a part one and part two getting an Oscar nod.
Well,
Um,
the Lord of the Rings, you could say, were kind of a one, two, three. I mean, they were filmed all back to back, and then the third one won all the awards in 2003. But I
yeah,
mean,
see, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, so wait, they did win.
yeah. So that might be an example of what you're describing, but that's certainly
Yeah,
super duper rare.
yeah. Because I've completely forgotten about them winning Oscars at all.
I think it
Um,
swept in 2003. It like won
well,
basically everything.
but see, that's the thing too. Like those movies, for those movies also depended a lot on the lore to establish a story and to get to that level, which I
Oh yeah,
think that this movie definitely would have had that ability if they had leaned more into it and built it up and told some of those stories and given some more complexity and context for certain things. Context matters for anything. You can't just necessarily throw things in and expect it to resonate with everyone. You will get pockets of people who can identify certain things, sure, but on with a movie, you want to make sure you're hitting as broad of an audience as possible. And I feel like there were certain things that could have been explained a little bit more that would have helped them to do that, but there just maybe wasn't time, maybe that scene was cut or whatever it was. But
right.
again, solid movie, solid performances from the cast throughout. Definitely think that uh, uh, the movie is worth the watch. So if you have Max or Tubi or any of those other things that allow you to watch it, definitely sit down and take the time to watch it. Now, the other movie I had planned on watching was One Thing After Another. That was the Leonardo DiCaprio and Tiana Taylor movie, but I didn't get around to that one. May do that one tomorrow, so we'll see. But we're not here to talk about all that. We are here to talk about Star Trek Voyager, Eye of the
Yeah,
Needle, and
yeah,
interesting episode.
yeah,
Get to see the captain let her hair down, literally. So
yeah.
now, do you want me to give the recap, or do you want to do it?
I'm down if whose turn is it? Whose turn is it to do it?
I think you did last week.
Then go for it.
Okay, I'll be brief, because we can just talk about it.
Yeah.
Basically, this episode is all about the crew. They're it's kind of mundane how it starts. Everybody's just kind of going about their business, but then Janeway is doing her whole captain's log thing, and she notes that Harry Kim is all excited because they believe that they have found a wormhole somewhere. There's one possible near them. Harry Kim is excited because if they find a wormhole, then this could be their shortcut home that everyone is looking for. Um, they realize that where the wormhole is located, it's a pretty significant distance away. So they're not really sure they want to make the course correction. But
Mhm.
basically, Harry wins them over with his very youthful enthusiasm. So they divert, they get to the coordinates, and lo and behold, there's no wormhole. But then Tuvok's like, wait, there is. It's a baby one. It's a really, really small one. And everybody is
Yeah.
just like, well, this sucks. Thanks a lot, Harry Kim. That's why you're still in NC. And but then we're like, well, it's maybe it's big enough that we can send a message through of some kind. So
Right.
they start trying to do that, but the message keeps getting hung up in the um, wormhole somehow, some kind of way. They're not really sure what's going on, so they decide that they're going to launch a probe. They launch a micro probe. It gets down in there, but the probe gets wedged in, and they decide that, well, we're not going to let this be a total loss. We can maybe use the probe to piggyback our signal to the other side and figure out what's over there. And so sure enough, they do, and they find out that this uh, probe or this wormhole leads to the Alpha Quadrant. And now they're really excited because I mean we can't get through, but maybe we can send our messages and things through.
Mhm.
They continue to tinker around with it for a bit until finally they make contact with a ship that's over there. And the ship is a Romulan ship. And
Mhm.
they're just like, enemy, but we're desperate. So they decide that they are going to trust this guy and they make contact. The Romulan is like highly skeptical about Federation, anything, as he rightly should be, because they're enemies at this time. And she's, Captain Jane was like, "Yeah, we're in the Delta Quadrant." He's like, "The hell you say? There's no ships out that far. Like, as far as they're concerned, like the Delta Quadrant might as well be a myth. Like, we understand in theory, but yeah, whatever. You
Right.
must be some kind of spy vessel." Janeway's like, "Nope, we've got to find a way. Like, how can I convince you?" So forth and so on. They eventually do figure out a way to convince the guy, and they begin talking. And she's just like, "Look, we can't get through. We would love it if you would be willing to send our messages to our families to let them know at least that we're all right and that we're trying to make it home." She does several late night chats with the guy. We see her again, in her night clothes with her extremely long hair. Didn't know she had long hair. I mean, it's one of those scenes where I was just like, I understand that she's wore her hair up in a bun, but Jesus. But anyway, so she's talking with the guy, really trying to relate to him, and finally convinces him. And so then he's like, I believe you, but there's still no way I really, yeah, can trust that you are where you are.
Right.
And so then they're like, well, maybe what we could do, I forgot this part because there was a plan to basically beam the crew to his ship.
Yep.
And before they were going to do that, they needed to test it.
Yep.
So he agrees to let them begin these tests. The tests are successful. And so they decide they're going to bring him to them.
Right.
And so they do. And he's all very impressed. They couldn't believe that this, thing worked out, whatever it is. So they send him back eventually, and now they're like, okay, we're gonna carry out our plan. And if I'm remembering correctly at this point, because I'm trying to like scan here, but I'm remembering correctly, once they send him back, uh, it was during that process of beaming him forward and back, they realized there's a temporal variance to the micro wormhole. And when he arrives, Tuvok's like,
Yeah.
"What
When
year do
he,
you think it is?"
yeah.
That's what it is when he arrives. Tuvok's like, "What year do you think it is?" And he says it, and he's like, "Actually, it's 23, whatever." So they realize he's from 20 years in the past. So
Right.
now they realize they can't send everybody through because they'll be trapped 20 years in the past. So they
Correct.
agree to send him back, but this time they're going to, he's like, "I will, now that I know that you're real and I understand what's happening, I will take your messages. And in 20 years, I will deliver your messages. And
Right.
they're like, great, that's something, right? So they do. They send him back. And then Tuvok, Mr. Resident Delta
Wait till the
Quadrant
last
Debbie
minute to
Downer,
drop this information on
right?
us.
Didn't want to say anything in front of the guy, but he died in 23, whatever, like 4 years before he would have been able to send their messages. So, no messages, no point to any of this. You just wasted all of our time. Harry Kim, again, you're staying an ensign. Now, while this is going on, we also have this minor B plot here of the doctor treating uh, Ensign Lieutenant Baxter, who apparently does nothing but work out like all the time because he keeps getting workout injuries. He's, pulled something. He pulls a hamstring at one point, I think he does, or
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
he's just got a series of injuries. Kes is trying to figure out why he's getting all these injuries, and the doctor is also trying to assist, but Baxter is like completely ignoring the doctor and talking directly to Kes like the doctor isn't even there. That this makes the doctor rather short tempered, which Kes also notices. And then basically she just kind of goes to advocate for the doctor. And she's just like, I don't understand why people treat him this way. He's, he's your doctor. Like, be
Right.
nice. Baxter comes back later on in the episode, and after Kes has kind of talked to the doctor, um, and also Janeway has talked to the doctor. There's another scene where the doctor had been deactivated by another ensign somewhere along the way. And
Yep.
basically, what we determine is the crew doesn't acknowledge that the doctor is of any kind of significance. They treat him like a tool, which he is.
Right.
And so the doctor, basically at Janeway's consideration and talking to the doctor and Kess's insistence, he's like, you guys need to start treating me like an actual flesh and blood member of the crew. And so when Baxter comes back with yet another injury, he gets in Baxter's face and corrects him and is like, you will address me. I'm
Right.
the doctor, not her.
Right.
And this begins that process of getting over their hologram bias. He's not just equipment. He's people,
Right.
which had to be a bit of a mind fuck, to be completely honest, for every person who's ever treated holograms, one particular way. Now you're kind of being ordered to do something different. So,
Right.
um, yeah, opens up a lot of issues with AI and sentience, and how far do you let your computer program run, and so forth and so on.
Right.
But that's it. That's essentially this episode. Of course, we're going to talk about some things in more gritty detail here, but that's it. And if you want to watch the episode, it is of course available on Paramount Plus. So head on over there, watch it, and then maybe come back and see if you agree with our discussion.
Exactly.
So now, David, as a first-time viewer, I always like to ask you, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, this is a good one. This is arguably the best episode so far since the pilot, which is interesting because according to Wikipedia, this is of the first season rated the best episode, tied with Caretaker, the pilot.
Mhm.
And it's directed by Winrich Colby, who directed the pilot and directed the episode Phage, which was just 2 episodes ago, which was at that point the best episode so far. Um, it's funny. This is only episode 6, or again, episode 7, if you want to count the first episode as 2. And at one point, Commander Tuvok, in talking with, they realize that the Romulan is from 20 years in the past, and they are trying to discuss, well, does it make sense to try and just beam everyone to this guy's ship, even though it's in the past? And Tuvok is like, no, our presence in the Delta Quadrant has had ramifications that we can't undo. We've been massively important to the history of the Delta Quadrant. And I was just like, what in the are you talking about? You guys have had literally none, short of the pilot episode. The second episode, literally nothing happened. In the third episode, it was your very presence that caused everything to happen, and it ended with you guys forgetting that it ever happened. Phage was the only episode where that could be counted as true, but
But you're
that's
also forgetting the Kazon and Neelix and Kes and the Ocampans and the destruction of the Caretaker Array and all those things that happened because Voyager came to the Delta
I
Quadrant.
mean, only that pilot episode could that even count? And okay, fair enough. But just let's just say that the way Commander Tuvok talked is like we're in season 5. And
Well, I mean, he's just making a point that we can't negate what we've done.
I'll tell you
You
right
know,
now, if Commander Tuvok, if I had been in the room and Commander Tuvok said that, and this is how far it's been a couple of weeks since we've been here, I'd be like, "Shut up, Commander Tuvok! If I have a chance to go home."
and I'm sure that there are a lot of people who were like, in universe who are probably like, man, shut up! This Vulcan always messing up plans. Just
Well,
go
he's not.
away. We'll leave you here. We'll
Well, it's
leave
not
you here.
Tuvok said it, not the Vulcan, not Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Chakotay. I've been saying Tuvok. I mean, Chakotay said it. My bad. Chakotay is the one who said it, and I would have been like, Chakotay, shut your dang mouth already. Um, Tuvok, no, Tuvok was the one who was like Mr. Revelatory in this episode, including at the very end of being like, "Oh yeah, I didn't want to tell anybody, but he dies 4 years before we ever left on our mission." I would have pulled the guy aside and been like, "Hey, can I at least ask that you like make a will to make sure, just to just to
Well, that's
clarify?"
what and that's what Janeway says. Like maybe he left a will, maybe he
But we
whatever,
have no way of knowing.
but we have no way of knowing. So it's like one more thing that we've got to hope for.
Right,
And yeah, and what good would it do? Like your messages, while I guess comforting, they would have been devoid of anything that could have been used to help you because I mean, even though you're depending on this Romulan to send these messages, you don't want to be putting in things that could also alter the future for the development of the Romulan people and the Federation either.
right,
So all your messages would have to be scrubbed of any mention of any kind of technology, of people. I mean, how hard would that be? Because you're sending personal letters, So it's like, oh, this is the captain of the ship in the future in 20 years. Well, in our current timeline, she's just lowly whatever. So if we hop over here and blow her ship up, problem solved, right?
right, right.
Yeah, so I mean, even sending the messages is problematic. They really shouldn't have done it. And yeah, and trusting, and let's just say that he didn't die, trusting that he didn't use the information about their entire crew for
Right.
ill
Yeah.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Especially considering the timeline that they would have been giving him this information. So,
Yeah.
yeah, none of it really makes sense. Once they figured out that he was from a different time, they should have been like, well, thanks for playing, wipe your memory and send you on home and send him
Exactly.
right back. That's what they should have done and
Yeah.
kept it
Well,
moving.
he was quite the accommodating Romulan, this Telek. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll put it this way: the moment. Well, there were several scenes where Janeway is talking to him. There's of course the scene you mentioned where her, she's in her nightgown, her hair's down. It's their first real conversation, but it's the next scene where she's on the bridge and she asks him like, you're on this mission, it looks like, and you're away from family, tell me about that. And he's like, oh yeah, I haven't even met my newborn daughter. And she's like, well, you can see our predicament and I'm sure you can empathize with us. And I'm just kind of laughing to myself a little bit because I'm like, I mean, if the Vulcans are like, we're not into the whole emotions or ruling our behavior kind of thing, I would think the Romulans maybe take it up a notch in their own kind of.
No, the
They
Romulans are opposite because so this is a bit of the world building lore stuff that I love so much. The
Okay, great.
Romulans are definitely an offshoot of the Vulcans, but the reason that there's an offshoot in the first place is because long time ago there was a group of Vulcans who believed that the total suppression of emotions was wrong, and they so much so that they actually began a civil war on the Vulcan about this, and they
Right,
were losing and ended up taking what money and ships and people they had that were their followers, and they departed the planet. A lot of them didn't even make it on the planet. There's a great book that talks about it, and then, there's like this massive dogfight to just get into space, and so many of their ships like blew up that they had to make a blind warp jump to get out of orbit before they were destroyed by the Vulcan planetary weapons of the era,
oh wow,
and
okay.
so they didn't know where they were going to end up, and they kind of fell out of warp, and it just so happened that there was this planet, and the
Came
planet
Romulus.
was, yeah, There was two planets. It's a binary planetary system. There were two planets, and even then there were problems because the ships had been severely damaged, and some of the people landed on Romulus, some of them landed on Remus,
Remus. Mm,
and then there's the issues that come up there.
yeah.
But yeah, the it's a philosophical split that then led to physiological changes, as they did not try to master their emotions at all. They did not try to suppress them in any way. They were very ruthless. They were also preyed upon by some other um, species, civilizations in the nearby area. So that kind of set them up to be particularly nasty and ruthless because they had to defend themselves so much.
Right.
So that's why they developed this very, um, like, again, ruthless, militaristic bent on everything. Everyone, in their opinion, was out to get them because they were the superior ones, and
Right.
no one wanted that knowledge to get out. So when their empire started to grow, they maintained that sense of ruthless superiority. We don't come at you until we know we can defeat you. And a lot of the Romulans' early victories were just that. They would appear out of nowhere en masse with a bunch of technology and just decimate spaces.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Okay.
they went hardcore, warlike, aggressive.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
That's actually pretty cool. I like that idea that they have. I mean, the Romulan culture is very unique.
yeah.
I guess so. If it's not so much that they suppress emotions per se,
No,
they
they
are
let them all hang
very.
out.
At least the Romulans we've encountered primarily on TNG are very much in the we like to manipulate things vein, and we always
Mhm.
assume that others are trying to manipulate things in their turn.
Right. That's
um,
that's exactly it. We assume you're trying to manipulate things because we know we are. And
right,
if we're trying to do it, we assume you're trying to do it too. And so no
exactly.
matter how many times you tell us, "Oh, we
We're
come
just
in
in the Delta
peace,
Quadrant. We
we're
need
your
help.
friends." Right. We come in peace, we're your friend. We just want to be your friends. The more we think,
Nah,
no
there's something
way, you're
else
trying to
going
set
on.
us up for something because that's what we would do.
Right. Well, I
And
guess what
that's been played to mixed success throughout much of Trek history,
right.
with between the Federation and the Romulans.
Well, the reason I bring it up in particular is because by Janeway mentioning, "Hey, like we have our family situation and you have yours. Like, empathize with us." I mean, that's such a direct attempt at a. I mean, I'm not saying she's trying to manipulate him. It's a pretty clear appeal to emotion, so it's not manipulation per se. But it's like part of me was thinking like, is this character just like he's not Romulan enough, or maybe he's just a science officer who's not quite as petty in his like he know like all Romulans are kind of always suspicious, but maybe he's not like the ones that encountered Picard. I bet the one that he was always interacting with, like that guy was a jerk all the
Tomalak.
time. Yeah, like this guy's a
Yeah,
science
Tomalak was
officer.
very much a ruthless, militaristic individual. And
Right.
that's another thing that Star Trek tries to do a lot is it makes these differences in people based upon profession. Like
Yeah.
Tomalak was power hungry and a military strategist.
Right.
So he was always looking for that kind of advantage, and that's why he was always coming up against Picard. Picard was the captain of the Federation flagship. He was known to be a known diplomat, an accomplished diplomat, but also a capable, fighter in his own right too, leading that powerful ship. And Tomalak loved getting in Picard's face because it enhanced his own reputation.
Right.
Now we see this other Romulan here, and Janeway's able to make a connection with him because he's also on a science mission. And scientists are different than military strategists. They're a bit more open-minded. They're a bit more, aware of the craziness of the universe. And she tries to appeal to him on this more basic stance. You have a family, I have a family. How would you feel if you were separated from your family while you're doing your work? We're just in the long line of people doing that, trying to stay in contact with our family. Can you help us out? That
Right.
never would have worked on Tomahawk, never. But the open-minded scientist, she's got a shot.
Right. Yeah. 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 This Tom or this Telek, I think is his name. Um, yeah, he
Mhm.
he comes off to me, like the reason I got on board with the idea that he wasn't as suspicious as the others is because it seems like he's a science guy. He's off doing whatever science mission. He's like an astronomer, right? Like we find out that's what he's from. He's
Mhm.
from, so he's not the quote unquote like, it's not Tal Shiar, right? Is it Tal Shiar that are
No,
the
he doesn't work for the Tal Shiar. He's
well, that's what I
just
mean. The,
yeah,
the secret order that the Romulans have. That's not
yeah. It's
him.
called the Tal Shiar, but it's not
Right.
him. Yeah.
So he's just a guy. He starts off with his being super suspicious, but like he can, as Janeway says, like you can check our data, you can see we're originating in that Delta Quadrant. So it comes to the point where it makes sense that this guy would be like, oh, okay, this is legitimate. This is a real ship asking for help. And Romulans might start off with a kind of gruff exterior, but I imagine they have learned the well. First off, that the Federation, they're maybe a bit of they're kind of suckers, maybe like maybe he can, even if he's playing the nice guy, maybe even then he can still find a way to manipulate it in his favor. He'll get the he'll get the details on the ship, for example, that they might already have the infiltrated Starfleet, and get the schematics, but he'll have firsthand experience with this or that, and I don't know, maybe the character would have been more manipulative if we'd given him a chance, but he doesn't come off that way in the end. Comes off as a rather nice guy. However, there it is kind of funny that this guy would. I mean, this is again, it's a Romulan. The idea that we need to test this, technology and see if we can beam our people from our ship to yours. Well, I can't let you do that, but let me have you beam me to your ship. Like, I'm sorry if just his willingness to do it the other way around was like, I mean, thank you for being willing to be the
Well,
guinea pig, but I wouldn't have volunteered.
I mean, I don't think I would have volunteered either, but I can kind of see it from his perspective. If this is a elaborate Federation trap, if I agree to let you bring your people to my ship, I could suddenly find myself surrounded by highly trained, very capable Starfleet officers on my
Secretive
maybe
shit.
not top secret ship.
Yeah,
But if you are who you say you are, then I'm in no danger. I don't risk my ship. I don't risk my crew. The risk is just to myself. I
right,
can beam over there and figure this out and go from there,
right.
you know? So it's a smart move while also being very risky because he confines the risk to himself only. Um, and then, of course, when they're found out to be telling the truth and everything else, he's much more on board with things. But yeah, I mean, I get why he did it, but yeah,
Yeah,
like I wouldn't have agreed. I just went like, okay, you sent the testing through, thanks, but even still, I'm gonna say no.
right. Well,
Um,
I mean, they said to him like, we need to do some tests. We want to beam some people across to you. He could have said like, we're not doing that. Keep testing with these like cylinder things that you just did.
yeah,
Like keep doing that. And meanwhile, the transport troop ship that I mentioned, like it's on the way. Like that's what I would have done if I were him.
and
Um,
it's just, and that's also a part I always wonder too, like how close are you to Federation space? Because is it possible you could have just like sent a message to the Federation? It's been like, hey, send a ship to pick these people up.
right.
I'm not doing it. This will be your one freebie. You're right here on the edge of the
Yeah.
neutral zone. Cross over, get your people, and head on. You know.
Yeah, he could have sent some sort of secretive message to the Federation being like, I'm not telling you any details, but you want to send someone over here. Um, Something like that.
But the way
But
that also I have to. The whole plan was stupid. You are trapped in the Delta Quadrant. It's going to take you if all things are even, it's going to take you 75 years to get home. Okay, cool. But you're willing to transport yourself through a micro wormhole to end up in enemy territory 20 years in the past. A large portion of your crew wasn't even alive yet. Harry is what, 24? So he'd have been 4.
right,
And you want to then hope that you somehow make it back to the Federation where they would have to quarantine you because they don't want you to mess up the timeline, which you have already contaminated just by coming through it and being in the hands of the Romulans. And also, by the way, the Romulans, who, upon finding out that your temporal variants, that you're from 20 years in the future, what makes you think they would release any of you?
Hmm.
And then, not to mention, what are you going to do about Voyager? I guess set it on self destruct and
Yeah.
hope that it blows up because no one will be around to see it, right?
Except the doctor, as we find out, he would just be kind of stuck,
Yeah, they just
not
blow up
being
the
free.
ship.
Yeah.
They blow up the ship so it
Yeah.
can't fall into Kazon hands. Blow it up.
Yeah. But I have
That's
to, I have
that's the
to,
only option. So again, the potential of how you could get home faster, or run all of those risks to go home and be Back to the Future.
yeah.
No, no dice. It's not worth it. It's not
Right.
worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a timey-wimey episode in that sense of like, what are the ramifications of us traveling through time? Um, in some ways, it like, well,
You
anyway.
could, okay, let's say that you're a person who has a kid, like Tuvok. We know Tuvok has children. Tuvok, your youngest child is 10. And as a Vulcan, if you just take this trip normal, you could get home and see your kid when they're 80. And
Hmm.
as Vulcans live a very long life, that's still fine, whatever. Or, or you could take this shortcut, end up back 20 years before, or 20 years earlier, 10 years before your kid was even a glint in anyone's eye.
Hmm.
But you can't be a part of that life because the Tuvok that's in that timeline is still there. So you still can't be a part of that life. You'll never get to see your kid again because
Hmm.
effectively there's two of you in this timeline, right? And then you
Yeah.
got to hope that no one else of your crew of 140 plus individuals, you got to hope that none of them decide to break temporal prime directive
Yeah.
and go and find their family members and contact people and alter the course of history. You guys are all hazards. You're all hazards. And
Right.
even if one of you does it, the moment that they find out what other group you are with, you're all screwed. It's
Right.
not worth it. It's a stupid, stupid plan.
Right. By the way, the temporal prime directive you just mentioned. I haven't watched the Orville, but I've seen clips of it because, of course, I see Star Trek clips on YouTube, and so Orville gets sometimes thrown in there.
Mhm.
And there is apparently an episode where I guess the pilot, I forget the name of the actor, but he's the redhead one. Um, he gets somehow lost in Earth's past, and they
I
finally
remember
catch
that
up to him,
episode.
and he's like lived on Earth for like at least 10 plus years, and he like has a family now, and they're like, you broke the prime directive or whatever they call it in the Orville. And he's like, screw you guys, you left me here for 10 years. The first 5 I did everything I was supposed to do, and then I got so lonely that of course I tried reintegrating into society, and I now have a family. So don't you dare, like, first, like, reprimand me, and don't you dare take me away from my family. Like, I'm now invested in this life I have, and I don't know how the rest of the episode goes. I just
I can
loved
tell
it.
you.
Go ahead.
So yeah, you're right. There's a couple episodes that are important. There's another episode earlier on where a historian played by Tim Russ Tuvok, a historian comes aboard the Orville and he's uncovered these various artifacts. One of them being a cell phone, and in the cell phone they're able to reactivate it, and it contains all of these text messages and photos and things like that from the owner. The owner is the girl that we later see he's married to in that episode that you're talking about.
Okay.
So in that episode, he hooks the phone up to their version of the holodeck and creates a simulation of her and a simulation of her life and what she was like based off of all the information they were able to pull from the phone. He ends up falling
Mhm.
in love with this holographic character,
The
which
the
when
who falls in love?
the helmsman, the redhead.
Okay, gotcha.
And so when Ed and the rest of them find out what's going on, they're like, dude, you really gotta, cut this out. And eventually he does. So then flash forward to the episode where, they go back in time when he gets stuck and everything else.
He
One of the
found
things
the
he does
girl.
is he finds the actual girl. He makes the
Gotcha.
connection, they start dating, they end up having this whole life. And I
Because he got to
think,
practice on a hologram
right.
version of her.
And I know you said 10
uh,
years. I think it's a bit longer than that
well, yeah, I was
before.
trying to make it
Yeah,
like
because
yeah.
because he's got a kid and he's had a whole career. He's like he becomes a experimental pilot, and he flies all these planes and stuff like that. He has a very successful, life in the early 2000s
Right.
when he's trapped or whatever. So when they come back for him, he does exactly what you said. He kind of chastises them because he's like, I've been here all this time. I had to do something.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, you broke the rules. And it's also their whole thing is like, you're supposed to basically find the most remote area possible and live your life as a hermit. That's the protocol. You didn't do that. And you're messing stuff up. So they're like, he's like, well, Ed's like, well, there is a way we can solve this. We can just jump back to
Further back.
earlier in
Mm.
the timeline, and we'll pick you up before you get all this. And he's
Right.
like, don't you do that. I've had this whole life. It's important to me. Don't you erase my
What
life.
I
And they're
am.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, nah, bro. And so they like try to leave. He tries to shoot him to stop him. And he's like, nope, doesn't matter. We're just going to go do this. And so he's like begging with them to not erase his life and everything else, but they don't listen. And so then the next thing you see is where they do jump back a little bit further and they pick him up on Earth. But at that point, he'd only been on Earth for like 6 months. So it
Right.
was when he was following protocol. And
Right.
so he's like, thank God, I thought you guys had,
Left me.
forgotten
Yeah.
about me and everything else. And so
Ah, that's
he'd only
brutal.
been, yeah, he'd only been there for 6 months. They pick him up, they bring him back to the ship, they make the jump back home.
And the rest of
But
the crew
Ed,
like never
well,
mentions.
no, Ed tells him. Ed's like, I feel like I've got to tell you. And
Right.
so Ed tells him the whole thing about how they, things got messed up. He was there for far longer, the life he had and everything else. And he says, I'm glad that you all came and you did another jump and you got me earlier. It
Right.
sounds like I was about to, go down a path and make a horrible, horrible mistake. I'm glad you didn't let me stay and do that.
Right.
So he thanks them. So it's like it's so interesting because we just saw him give a very, very heartfelt performance about keeping the family and everything else. And now here he is being just as earnest and being like,
I'm
that
glad
would
you
have
did what
been
you did.
terrible. I'm
Yeah.
glad you did what you did. It was good. It was really good. So
Yeah.
yeah, kudos to Orville.
I've heard from you that the Orville is actually pretty good. I guess
The
it like
Orville is actually pretty good. It's a nice balance of comedy and drama
I
and
well I
sci-fi.
well I feel like just hearing you talk about it and just like watching those clips, like it went from a show that started off with the comedic angle, but because it's a Star Trek inspired show, it has to take certain things seriously, and so it veered into the
Yeah,
seriousness of its own source material.
which
Um,
honestly I think is what inadvertently caused it to cancel because I think that when they first greenlit the show and it
it
was,
was also
Seth
CGI.
MacFarlane, I
Yeah,
think they thought that they were going to get a Trek inspired comedy show.
yeah,
And, they just I think they were through the moon with it. But very quickly in the first season, it turns. And yes, there's jokes and yes, there's irreverent references and things like that, but they deal with like legit stuff, in the sci-fi with a sci-fi backdrop. And I think that's why it began to struggle. And so,
mm,
you got season 1 and season 2, then there was like that weird hiatus, and they came back and did season 3. And to me, season 3 is where it really takes off because that's where they were like in full acknowledgement. No, we are a sci-fi show. We are
right,
in that same vein, truly. Yes, we're gonna still do jokes and whatever else, but we are a sci-fi show. And
right.
there are some spectacular um, special effects in there. There is a great space battle scene in it. I think I watched it like 3 times. It was great. In fact, you know what? I might watch it later on tonight. It was great. And then it's been on the back burner for so long, and with franchises changing hands and who's buying what and what's on Hulu and Fox and Disney and Marvel and all of that's going on. It kind of got lost in the shuffle a bit. I know that Disney at last report had purchased it, and actually at last report I read just before we started doing our show tonight that final scripts for a season 4 have been submitted and approved. So it sounds like they're gearing up to start filming again.
Right.
um, and who knows, in the next year or so, we may have some new Orville episodes. Couldn't come at a better time because a lot of Trek is going on hiatus, and there's not going to be any Trek in production for a bit. I know that, like we talk about the final season of Strange New World, season 5 is getting ready to release. The final episodes of Starfleet Academy are also getting ready to be released, and no word yet on a season 2 for the Academy show. So it's in 60 years we're coming up on this this wall where there will be no Trek in production. It'll be the first time in 60 years that that's happened. So
Mm.
unless there's a movie on the horizon or a new show, or they're gonna at the last minute announce production on season 2 of Academy has begun,
Mhm.
there's not going to be any more. So the Orville could really fill a void that we don't uh, want to leave blank. So
Right.
we'll see. We'll see. But back
Yeah.
to Voyager in this episode. Let's switch our topic. Let's talk about uh, Mr. Baxter, Lieutenant Baxter, this workout enthusiast who can't seem to understand that the doctor is who he needs to be addressing when he's talking about medical issues, and the non-scene, the off-screen Ensign Kyoto, who also shut the doctor off at one point when she was just done using him. You know,
Right.
um, this is the first introduction to holograms being treated like sentient beings that we've really seen on Voyager. Now, I know in Deep Space Nine we had Vic, but Vic recognizes that he is a hologram and isn't necessarily asking to be treated like a person. He's just like, I'm your better than average hologram, and that's it. It never comes up to do anything different for him the way that it seems like the direction they're moving with the Doctor.
Well, I mean, Rom or not Rom, but Nog does eventually get it so that Vic is never turned off, just like the Doctor basically is
Well,
asking
yeah.
for.
Well, the doctor is asking to be turned off, but Janeway gives him something different. She
The
gives him the
ability,
ability to control his program, to turn it
right,
off and on whenever he wants, and to stop people from turning him off whenever they want.
right,
Vic, on the other hand, gets his program to where it will run continuously.
right.
He can sleep in a bed, he can travel, he can have a meal if he wants, he can do all these things inside the program. And so he's basically just like he's confined into that whole atmosphere. That whole program would continue to run. The doctor, on the other hand, he's not, in his, off hours, cruising around Vegas or whatever. He would still be in sick
Working.
bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at is that well, no, I'm not getting at it. I guess we're just talking about it. But like the thing that stood out to me that was strange. Well, I guess Vic Fontaine would have been still later on in Deep Space Nine compared to where we are with with Voyager, and
Yes. Yes. We haven't gotten there yet.
TNG has ended, but the only character on TNG that was a hologramic character that ever seemed to gain sentience was the Moriarty
Moriarty character.
character. So the thing that stands out to me though is that I'll put it this way: the TNG cast, the officers, the crew that we come to know and love, it seems like they're kind of a step above just everybody else because
I'll
it
grant
seems
you that. Yes.
it seems like this, Lieutenant Baxter. I mean, every other like lieutenant or ensign or they're all a bunch like if Lieutenant Baxter is treating a hologram character like in some sort of weird biased way, it just seems like wouldn't Starfleet Academy have like trained this out of people on some level? Like you treat alien species, different cultures, unexplained phenomenon, you always respond with respect. I mean, maybe the guy was in his own weird way being
So
respectful by like talking to the real alien who's there, and
I
I don't
see
know.
your point, but here's the distinction I think is important. in Next Generation, we always saw their interactions with holographic characters on the holodeck. You had to go to the holodeck. It was a very specific spot. On Voyager, the Doctor is a new program. He is an
True.
untested program. No
True.
one's heard of a holographic officer before. He
Right.
is literally the first. And again, he wasn't supposed to really be activated. If the Doctor, the real Doctor, hadn't died, no one would have had to deal with him at all. So
Right.
now we're coming into this new situation. They're weeks into a new situation. This Doctor is now our full time Doctor, but he's still a hologram. So I think what we're missing here are people who are dealing with how do we address this thing that's in a space we're not accustomed to. You know, he's not a
Mhm.
hologram on the holodeck. I'm not on the holodeck. I went to sick bay. So I'm used to dealing with a person in sick bay. So of course I address my questions to the person who's running the program. That's how it's always been done. I
Mm.
address the person running the program. I assume it's Kess. It's trying to they haven't yet understood that the distinction here is the Doctor is,
Somehow sentient and somehow
well,
more.
not so much sentient, but he is the one that he's supplementing the place of your real Doctor, so you need to address him as you would address the real Doctor.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, he's sentient. He is the Doctor. He's the real thing as
is he
much as.
sentient though? Like, I mean, we haven't
Well,
really
that's the
established.
question, right?
Yeah,
That's that. I mean, to be fair,
so
that's what's
that
gonna
is the
be great.
question.
That's
And
what's gonna be great
so,
about this character as we go
right.
throughout the season. Is he
Right. But we're
uh,
still weeks in. We're not, this isn't season 5 where they've
true?
had a chance to get accustomed to this. This is still very new. This is still very new. So you have
True.
people who are very used to holograms being confined to one space, performing
Right.
a certain function, being
Yeah.
controlled by the real person that's in the room. So
Right.
they're addressing it in the same manner. And the Doctor is like, no, we need to break you of this. We need to. So he's beginning to that. He's putting them on the learning curve. And
Right.
Janeway later facilitates that by giving him greater control over his program.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think that Baxter can be largely forgiven here because it's something that they're not accustomed to. It's not like Pulaski and Data, where she refused to acknowledge his sentience despite being a medical professional herself, having access to all the medical records of all the individuals on the ship, and knowing that Data had already been classified as a living sentient being. In fact, she says that when she makes her very flippant remark about Data, and then she's like, "Oh, forgive me. The records say you're alive. I've got to accept it." So she's already read his record. She's already aware, and yet she was still being flippant about his designation. That does not occur here for Baxter. There's no designation being made for the Doctor to say that he is in any way alive. As far as they're concerned, he's just the emergency medical holographic program. So
Right.
until someone changes that, which the Doctor does, which Janeway does, Baxter isn't at fault here. It may grate on us because we've already accepted the Doctor as a sentient being, but in universe makes perfect sense.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
not
Okay.
to destroy everything else that was going to be said there, but yeah, um, I mean that's and it's also it's easy to pick on Baxter because the way in which he's going about describing his problem and being dismissive and everything else, it's very overt and it's annoying. So if
Right.
he hadn't been quite so annoying about it, he might have gotten a little bit more slack and understanding from people.
Right.
But like, because he never apologizes, he never says, "Oh, sorry, my bad, didn't realize," or anything that like that. He just accepts when the Doctor finally gets in his face. He's like, "Okay, well, all right, I did this.
Right.
Fix it, Doc."
Yeah. I guess what I'm getting at is, well, the question that we are dealing with in the real world today is, what is AI? Is
Yeah,
AI alive? Is it sentient? And I don't believe it is. I've heard a number of people talk about it. Or not, I've heard some people talk about it, and I've heard people point out that like at least I, I believe the soul exists, and I don't believe you can fake a soul, and therefore robots are not going to be able to fake having a they're not going to become alive. I mean, we can sci-fi they can become alive because that's the purpose of sci-fi. But
in
I it
most sci-fi's, like take Data for example.
Hmm.
In most sci-fis, there is this assumption that with both knowledge, well, both, but three things: knowledge, time, and experience, anything can achieve sentience. We see this played out a lot in a lot of different sci-fis, but we also see it a lot in Star Trek. In the very first Star Trek movie, where they deal with the infamous entity V'ger, it's this probe that humans built centuries ago that got dropped off on the ass end of the universe and has slowly been making its way back towards Earth. And on its long journey back towards Earth, it's amassed so much knowledge and studied so many things over the countless millennia it's taken it to make its journey that it has achieved consciousness. And now it needs the next great thing so that it can leap forward.
Mm.
Data is also like that. Dr. Soon created a incredible android being, but gave it access to massive amounts of knowledge, and it has the ability to learn and adapt. But also, Data is far older than people realize. If you look, there's an episode where it shows Data's activation and service record. Data, like when we see him on the Enterprise for the first time, Data's 107 years old.
Mm.
And it's right there on the service card. It's like blink and you miss it, but
Mm.
it's there. And it's like they activated him. And then what was Data doing for 100 and something years before he joined Starfleet? No one knows. But he was active and roaming about the greater Alpha Quadrant for at least 100 years before he finally decided to join Starfleet. And then
Right.
he graduated 4 years later, and he's been on fast track ever since. So Data's old.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And Data is definitely presented as being a real being.
Yes.
His his lack of like humor and all that is because of his androidness. Um, but I guess what I'm getting at is that in this episode, the Doctor expresses, and he has been doing this before, but he's expressing frustration and loneliness. I mean, when he says that it's lonely, being on but having nothing to do. But my point is that the character is being presented as being alive in some sense. So, I mean, yes, if we went into the Hollow Suite, those characters would. But the characters in the Hollow Suite are never self-aware. We know that there were
No,
programs like.
and they're programmed to have certain emotions. We see that again. TNG was really great for the exploring of the hologram and the holographic programs. We see them used in a multitude of ways. From when Tasha uses one in that honor code episode to show battles, martial arts, to Worf and his mindless minions that he slaughters in his calisthenics program, to Barclay able to program the crew to be a
Mhm.
part of his holographic programs, and they all have vastly different personalities.
Mhm.
So it shows that you can, with enough programming, make them empathetic, sarcastic, funny,
Right.
sad. You can do all those things. So the Doctor showing that kind of empathy or emotional range isn't beyond the scope of what a hologram can be programmed to do.
Right.
Does his emotions, because he displays them appropriately, does that mean that he has achieved sentience, or is he just a finely tuned next level hologram?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, thinking about the AI situation, AIs can certainly fake. There are examples of AIs can fake some sort of sentience, some sort of being aliveness. Some people have
Mhm.
been convinced of something being there. I'm not yet. I honestly don't think I ever will get there in the real sense, but maybe the sophistication will be such that it's hard to tell. But yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm getting at though is that the idea that I was just kind of surprised that this lieutenant seems to kind of fail the test of, like, I can see someone being negligent and turning him off at a bad time or whatnot. But the idea that he's like having a hard time, I don't know. As you explained why that might be the case, so yeah, it's
So
plausible. It's
so
just
then to play the other side of it, We could not forgive Baxter because he also exists in a world where interfacing with holograms would be common.
Right.
Holodecks, holosuites, all that stuff has been a part of their world in their universe at least for 30, 40 years that we can tell by this point.
Right.
So him dealing with the hologram and knowing that it needs his direct input should not be strange to him. So for him to go into the sick bay and to see the hologram, know that the hologram is trained to be the doctor and very much aware of the fact that your only real doctor has died. The fact that he then chose to not give the clearly standing before him diagnostic tool the direct information, but chose to speak instead to someone else is wrong.
Yeah.
That's your doctor. You tell your doctor what's going on. You don't
Right.
tell the assistant, you don't tell the receptionist around the corner. You talk to
Yes.
the doctor. And knowing that it has all of the programming of all medical knowledge for you to interact with, give it the direct information so that it can directly tell you how to care for yourself or to give you that
That's
care.
that's it right there. That's what I'm getting at. Because even if you went into the Hollow Suite, this basically what Voyager has is a Hollow Suite to treat you for your wounds now.
Yes.
So if you went to a Hollow Suite to legitimately get it treated for your wounds, whatever the Hollow Suite presented you as a doctor, presumably you would treat it seriously. It's still a hollow projection, but you would still respond to that thing, not because you're like treating it as real even, but because like that's just what the Hollow Suite is.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just an interesting situation of um, are what's the training that these lieutenants were supposed to have gotten about how to interact with awkward situations, treat everyone with the level of
Like culture
respect.
sensitivity training.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
as you said, maybe he was treating Kess as the person, I mean, because she was the physical person actually there,
yeah.
and giving it to her instead of the doctor. But yeah, anyway, it was again the best episode so far. Excuse me, because of the doctor. I mean, he ends the episode by saying like, "Well, I want a name." So like whatever he is, he seems to be evolving.
Yeah, he's
So
definitely evolving, definitely changing. We're
yeah,
watching that now. At what speed are we going to see that is, you know,
and
your
Kess
guess
gives him a
because I
little peck
know.
on the cheek, and like Neelix wasn't in this episode at all. I was like, great, keep him out of here. I'm happy to have Kess not worry with Neelix. But whatever. I'm sure he'll be
I'll be
showing up
curious to
again.
see if Neelix grows on you. I'm going to try my best to not influence you one way or another. But I'll be curious to see if Neelix grows on you
Well,
because
I'll say it this way: if he's gonna grow on me, he has to be put in situations where he makes hard decisions. He's morally challenged and he makes right decisions. He's not as annoying. He's not this kind of ugly looking, high pitched, all he's there for is to cook food kind of character. I mean, whatever. I mean, if that's how the character ends up, fine. But at the moment, again, I don't want to be like, I hate the character just because I hate the character. I mean, the
no,
plot
I
of the
have a legit.
show.
I don't. I will tell you now. I do not like Neelix. I have a legitimate grievance against Neelix, and we will get there. We
Okay.
haven't gotten there yet. I mean, we've seen some things, but I'm gonna wait until some other things happen, and then I'm gonna relate all of this back so that you can track the movements to see how I arrived at my ire
So much
for
for
that
not,
character.
influencing my opinion, right? But yeah,
Hey,
no, I
I'm just
mean,
saying I don't like the character.
yeah,
You
well,
may end up liking the character, but I'm not going to tell you why until we reach a certain point. So by that
sure.
time,
But I mean, I
you
just want to
will have
just
your opinion.
just compare him to Quark, though.
Mm,
Quark is a lovable devil. He's a lovable imp. He's the lovable, curmudgeonly, you know, jerk, criminal, and he has a heart of gold, that kind of thing. Like Neelix is gonna have to work if we're gonna
Well,
come to love him in a way that his
well, and
his
once
heart of
again,
gold can't be I make good food
well,
for
once
these.
again, Quark comes from an established character base that we don't have with Neelix. We're
Hmm.
very much aware of what the Ferengi are, what kind of people they are.
Right.
So for Quark to play against type sometimes, it makes him more interesting for us. We
Yes.
know nothing of Talaxians. This is the first time we've ever seen one. We don't know if that kind of good-natured, you know, eager to please attitude that he has is indicative of his people or just something that he is doing as a survival mechanism to make sure these, new, impressive, powerful strangers like him and keep him
Right.
around. So there's a lot of things we need to learn about Neelix before we can really make the determination, or really things you need to learn. I maintain that no matter what, he's a bad character.
Yeah.
Um, but that's just me. And when we get through some more things, I'll remind you of this, and we'll talk about it. And you can see if at that time, do you still think that less is more of Neelix, or has he won you over a bit? Or once I lay my case out, do you see what I see? And this is
Hmm.
why he's not good. So
Gotcha. Okay.
that's all. That's all I'll say on that.
All right. We'll get there. We'll get
Well, we will get there. Anything
there.
else that we need to talk about in this episode? I feel like we've covered a lot
I'll
here.
I'll just say this real quickly. Yes, Janeway. Uh,
Oh yeah, we
who's
didn't
the
talk
act?
about Janeway much at all. Kate Mulgrew, we did
Yeah.
not talk much about her in this one, which is not good because she is a major focal point of this episode.
Yeah.
Her talks with our Romulan guest are very important.
Yeah. I find her character to be very interesting in a. I mean, I like her, but I have some issues. So first off, she's Kate Mulgrew is lovely this episode, very attractive, and then she has to go and then be the straight laced officer. I liked the hair down aspect of her. She's vulnerable. She's having to express herself, convince someone to care for her plight. Um, but there are moments where, and actually, I don't think it really happened much in this episode, but it certainly happened, I think, in the previous one, where like something will happen and she'll look at Chakotay like, "Did you hear what I heard?" Kind of I feel like she doesn't have the stoicness of Picard or Cisco. She doesn't have the
Hmm.
um. She's her face has more expression on it than of like concern and worry than we'll see from Picard or Cisco. Like we'll see them concerned or worried, but in a I don't know if it's a male thing where it's a I have to deal with this kind of thing. It's a you know concentrate your God I have a problem to kind of deal with kind of way. But there are moments where I feel like her character is in a very precarious position because is she as in control as we would expect a captain to be? And maybe that's exactly what the show wants because again, it's only season one,
Hmm.
and we're gonna have problems with that kind of stuff. Um, but for the moment, there are times when I'm like she'll issue an order, and she's good for it. Um, but I'm just wondering, like, who is this character going to be in the long run in terms of like being the authority of the ship? And I guess it was last episode where she was like, the captain doesn't usually get to know their crew; they're kind of standoffish to give the authority element. And maybe I should have talked about it more last week, but um, I think she's the best character, frankly. I mean, the other characters
Hmm.
are you got, Kim, who's the ensign. I think you were kind of teasing him this episode of like, screwing around. But you got Belana Torres, who's, we find out this episode that her father left when she was 5, and her mother is probably doesn't care where she is. Like no one back in the Alpha Quadrant really cares what happened to her. Um, we got Paris, who's anyway. We get all these characters have very gray backstories, and I'm not quite as like I'll just put it this
So
way: the
you
TNG
made a statement.
cast,
I was going to say you made a statement earlier, which I can see as a struggle is what's causing all of your struggle.
right?
The TNG cast is the Paragon. As much as they always try to, talk about the original series and those guys, those
Right.
old scientists, as they're later called for TOS, those old scientists. But it's definitely the next generation that those are our polished Paragon officers.
Right.
They've all been, trained. They've fully completed the academy. They've done all of this stuff, and they're all very established officers who rise quickly.
Right.
We aren't seeing that in a Voyager. Janeway is much younger than Picard when she takes command of Voyager. Chakotay was a graduate of the academy, but he resigned from Starfleet.
Right.
B'Elanna dropped out of the academy. The only true, let's see, Tom was kicked out. He never
Yeah.
finished the academy. Harry Kim is a recent, eager young graduate of
Right.
Starfleet Academy. Voyager is his first posting. Tuvok and Janeway are the most seasoned Federation officers on the ship,
Right.
but Tuvok is the most senior. And then,
Right.
and beyond him being a Vulcan, it does show up in his character as well with how much he falls in line and supports Janeway.
Right.
Um, Janeway, I think they definitely wanted her to kind of go against the type of what we saw in Picard and Cisco, those
Sure.
being the two captains that we are the most familiar with and were the most prevalent during the 90s and stuff. And again, Next Gen was over, but Deep Space Nine was still going. And so they
Right.
didn't want to have yet another very strong, you know, this kind of strategist, dynamic leader. On the ship because we already had this in Cisco. They
Right.
wanted somebody to be a little bit different. So
Yeah.
I if I remember correctly, there's an interview that Kate Mulgrew gives where she does talk about how they wanted her to, you know, have elements of that in her,
Right.
but they did want her to kind of go against that type. They did not want to see a female Jean-Luc, you know.
Sure.
So trying to, if I remember the interview correctly, she was talking about how it was kind of hard initially to find her balance on that
Hmm.
because there'd be times where it was just like, we don't need you to be that serious, or we need you to be a bit more serious here, or
Hmm.
we need you to ramp up the emotion and the tension here,
Right.
and even in this episode, that is something that she talks about was she loved this episode because it was a challenge to bring about this kind of emotional development of her character and how it played off of her interactions with both the Romulan and the Doctor in this episode. So I really like her portrayal here because, especially with the Doctor, it gives us like I wouldn't call it softness, but it's taking the time to have a certain level of understanding that I don't feel like we ever would have seen with Picard. And it's kind of a toss up 50-50 if we'd have got it with Cisco. Maybe
Right.
like seasons 1 through 3, Cisco, sure, but 4 through 7, that no, Cisco was too hard for that. But like the doctor telling her about his legitimate, issues and her hearing him out
Hmm.
and coming up with the potential solution with him, not making an order, not going somewhere else and having someone else just whip up a solution and implementing it without consideration of the person that said solution was going to um, affect. Because that's what Picard would have done. I feel like Picard, he might have listened to the doctor's, grievance or whatever, but then he probably would have gone to Geordi and been like, fix it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it broken? Like, run a diagnostics. Let me know if it's broken or not, and then we'll have a meeting in the ready room
Right.
about what to do about our holographic doctor, and then you and Data can go down there and implement it. I'm
Right.
not going back down there to talk to that thing again until you tell me it's fixed.
Right.
I think that's how he would have handled that.
Right.
But for her to go directly to the doctor, hear his side of it, talk with, Kess and understand what was going on there, and then come up with a solution with the doctor, it shows a different kind of handling that I really appreciated in her character. And yeah, and then her talking with the Romulan at night in her quarters, and she's just kind of trying to not so much plead with him, but just kind of get him to understand where she's coming from
Yeah.
and just kind of relating a life experience,
Right.
I really like that. Again, that's not something I feel like Picard would have done.
Yeah.
Again, toss up 50-50 if Cisco would have done it, but Picard definitely wouldn't.
Yeah.
And yeah, I liked that they had her doing those kind of things to give us this emotional grounding in the moment.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
Right. Well, what I'm getting at and what I'm thinking of is that with using TNG as the show to mainly compare against, because obviously it's about ships, traveling around. The paragonness of the TNG crew, they are the top of their form. They're clear moral exemplars, heroes. They're professionals in every way. It gives those characters a chance to exemplify the moral like the prime directive at its best, like the best episodes where it's not so much about what does Picard think about the prime directive per se, as much as what would the nth degree of the prime directive look like if we tried taking it to its extreme. So the character doesn't have to get in the way of exploring these really interesting themes. But these characters on Voyager are more morally complex, and so they are going to have a harder time, I would say. The character is going to be the one exploring the situation more in terms of their own moral progression than a TNG character would, I would say. A TNG character will come out of an episode and probably won't be too morally affected by how it happened. Like it's a problem they deal with and they deal with it professionally and it's done. So the Voyager is putting itself in a very interesting position in comparison to something like TNG by making their characters more gray, which normally I like. I think that's a good
Hmm.
thing in terms of making interesting storytelling. But it does mean that we're not so much exploring, or presumably, we're not going to be exploring as much what does Star Trek as a series, what are the themes of Star Trek, and what is it exploring, but what are these characters in this world dealing with in the Star Trek universe? Again, just to put a fine point on that, like that means that the characters themselves aren't as likable. Like I don't like this cast nearly as much as Data's
Well,
always been lovely
so
and Jordy is lovely. Like
and
you
so
know what
here's
I'm
what I'm
getting
going
at?
to say. Here's what I'm going to say to that. I think that is a difference in time, and that's when TNG came out versus when Voyager came out.
Sure.
With TNG, what they did was they presented us with, like I said, these polished,
Hmm.
well-formed characters. But
Right.
over time, as we got to know them, we got to see their shades of gray, right?
Sure.
Voyager did the inverse of that. They gave us nothing but gray starting out.
Yeah.
These complicated, convoluted characters who are all in these weird moral gray zones with the
Hmm.
Federation. The Federation that we feel so intensely connected to because of Next Generation and because of Deep Space Nine.
Right.
So now all of a sudden we are watching them kind of build, or in some cases rebuild, from these gray characters to upstanding Paragon characters. But this
Gotcha.
is the first season. We're
Mm.
not there yet.
Right.
Now, what'll be interesting is when do you feel like, because you're the one who's watching this for the first time, when do you feel like they've kind of achieved that? When do you feel like these are
Mm.
people who have that, oh, you know what? They really are good at their job. They're very competent. It's not a fluke. It's not a, whatever. Like they seem better for their
Right.
experience of being on this particular ship being led by Chakotay and Janeway and Tuvok respectively and so forth. Like
Right.
when do you see that change in some of these characters? But
Right.
I think that's why starting out they're not as likable because it just feels like an over emotional just dump, like we're getting all this stuff about these characters and it's so much and there are so many of them, it's
Hmm.
hard to focus and sort through all of it all right now,
Right.
but we'll get there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That's a good question. Like, when does it get to the point where it seems to have come to that point
where
where they,
they've gelled, and
yeah,
that's what it is. That's really what it is. That's what you're looking for. Because in Next
yeah,
Generation, they all seem to get along. They did things together. They functioned well together in groups, and whether that was a group of two or a group of six, they all worked well together. This group, they all seem like they're just a hair's breadth away from fighting each other, or from
mm,
just being like, "That's it. I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not playing this Federation game anymore."
right.
When does that go away and there's something like, you know what, like, we're in this together, we're a crew, we're a team, dare I say we're a family, and you know,
Yeah,
going
yeah,
on from there.
right. Yeah, true. And I want to. I'm trying to think of how to compare it to Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine has a different whole. It's not a ship traveling around. It's got a different angle of we got a merged crew as well, but it's the Bajoran government trying to recover from its Cardassian occupation, and Odo being a person out of time in his own way. He's not one of his people. He relates to us. Dax, they always had trouble making Dax work as a character, but things like Bashir and O'Brien, like they started off in a weird place and they got to be best buds. So we've definitely seen it happen where two characters are not gelling,
Yeah.
and then by the end they're best buds. So
So we'll
yeah, it's
see. We'll see if we
we
get any of that in any of these characters. But I mean, this is still very new. We're still in the first season. We're still, as they even say on the episode, they're just a few weeks
mhm,
into their journey. So
right,
they're all still very new to each other too. And there's also this kind of, when you, I feel like for them, when you're that new to each other, you're all still being like, this could end at any moment, right? We could, tomorrow. I mean, that's kind of what this episode is, right? Tomorrow we
mhm,
could find a wormhole that zaps us home, and then as soon as we get home, we're all going to go our separate ways and do different things. And some of y'all are going to jail because you're Maquis, and we were
mhm.
sent out here to arrest you anyway.
Yeah,
So
getting
you
home may not be what you actually want. Yeah,
exactly, like, I mean, we decided this is what we were going to do, but let's not forget that a lot of you are criminals in the eyes of the Federation, and when you get home, you're probably going to be facing criminal charges when you get there. So it's just like, what? Yeah, you put on the uniform, but yeah, handcuffs, buddy. They're coming.
yeah, yeah. The uniform was
So,
all. We only had uniform clothes in the closet for you to wear. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
we just did this for the sake of keeping the peace until we got home, and it made you easier to work with this way.
right.
So, yeah, I mean, now, I mean, obviously, I know what happens to these people and how long it takes and all that other kind of stuff, but I mean, it's essentially what it is. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's a good point to say that. Yeah, that they'll when trying to see when it all happens, because and even going back to TNG, the original season, the first season they don't gel like they do later on, of course. So
no, but they had a lot less problems because a lot of them, again, were trained officers. But you forget how many of them had a past with each other already.
true.
Picard knew Beverly and Wesley. Deanna and Riker
Riker.
also already had a connection. Geordi came on board with Worf. They were from the academy
And
together.
yeah,
So I mean, there are so many levels of overlap for these individuals that made them already familiar with each other that they don't have on Voyager, and they didn't have in D69 either.
right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
well, we certainly went for it on this episode.
Yeah. Well, I saw we hadn't got to an hour 30 yet, so I just decided to
That's what it
drag out the
was.
conversation. That's what it was.
Well, I think that
Yeah.
will that will do it for us on this one. But again, if anybody wants to go back and watch the episode, of course, you can find this one and every other episode on Paramount Plus. No, we are not paid by them in any capacity, so this is not a plug for money. It's just telling you where to go and watch it. Do with that information what you will. If you have another way that you access the show and that works for you, have at it. I don't
Right.
care. Just there you go.
Yeah.
As for us in our episodes, if you want to watch any episode from the past that we've done, you can find all of those on YouTube right now on our channel. Go over there, watch anyone, leave any comments that you want. Be respectful. But leave any comments that you want. We do go back and look at those things, and it may take us a little bit to respond to you, but we will. We'll get there. As for anything podcast related, if you like listening to us in the car, if you like listening to us to fall asleep because you think our dulcet tones are soothing for some particular reason, you can find all of our episodes anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to check us out on occasion on Spotify. So go have at it. No new Trek updates this week beyond what I said earlier in the episode. If you are enjoying, leave it. I'll just say this for anybody: if you are currently watching Star Trek Starfleet Academy and you love the show and what they've done so far, tell me why. And I'm not trying to be facetious about it or sarcastic or anything like that. I would just like to hear why you enjoy that show at this time. Maybe it'll be something that will spark my interest in going back and watching it. But I just want to hear from legit people why you like it. So just leave that comment somewhere. I'll find it and we'll go from there. But that's it. Until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.